Morning. Thank you so much for joining us. How are we this morning?
Great.
Good, thanks.
Perfect. So we have a really exciting webinar happening today, guys. So I'm going to kick off into that really quickly and hand you over to Natalie. But I just wanted to touch off on a few points that's happening with the Innovate Together Fund first, and then I'll hand you on over. But I suppose just because of the day that's in it and because of the webinar that we're having, I was wondering if you have a particular quote around leadership or a particular thought around your leadership style that you would contribute to the chat conversation, or something really kind of insightful that has happened to you over the last while. I think it'd just be really great to get some inspiration before we kick off this morning. So if I can ask you to put either a quote or an experience or some leadership quality that you really appreciate into the chat, that would be great. So while you're doing that, and just to run through some key housekeeping rules, because we're on Zoom, just where possible, while Natalie is presenting, if you can keep yourself on mute. If you have a question, please do put it in the chat box. We would ask that you keep your screen on. So again, ideally, we'd love to see you all in person and love to be having these in hotels and other areas where we could network with you. But this is our kind of way of getting to know you. So as much as possible, we'd really appreciate that. I just want to give you a bit of an oversight into the accelerator. So this is the last core workshop that we have this 2020. So what we are offering you is some additional workshops that are based on the moving services online webinar that we did the last time. So again, these are optional and we are asking you to self-select if you're interested in them. But I do want to just highlight they're a great opportunity to get some insights. And if you have any kind of questions on it, please just reach out to us and let us know. Okay. As you'll have seen, we have a full team now for Innovate Together. All of them are now on this call, so please do feel free to reach out to them. But you would have got an email from us yesterday just introducing who's going to be your contact for the next while. Please do feel free to reach out. I know the girls are very excited to get to know you and start working with you over the next year. So please do feel free to do that. The role is really, we are here to kind of help support you over the next year. So we want you to achieve your goals. We want you to progress, and we want you to be in as best a position as you possibly can. So please do feel free to reach out to us at any point with questions or any kind of opportunities you think we can help you with. So the two things I do want to just quickly highlight is we have the option of a speed back session. So the term is quite challenging for me to say for some reason, but it is an opportunity for you to present on your project and present on the technology development that you're doing. So Maeve, who ran our last webinar, has kindly offered to do this. What I would say is I have heard from her firsthand that it is quite an intense process. It is 5 minutes and you will get quite a direct critique if you are willing to participate in it. But in terms of the insights that you get, it is quite beneficial and really will help you kind of guide the project going forward. So we've sent around a doodle poll. We're asking for 5 minutes if you are interested. So you present for 2 and you'll get feedback for 3. But it is quite useful. So if that is something you're interested in, it's happening on Wednesday, the 16th of November, or sorry, Wednesday, the 18th of November, from 10 a.m. till 12 p.m. So if you have any interest in that, please do let us know. If you need us to send around the doodle poll again, we'll do that as well. And then I just want to highlight, guys, we have quarterly reports that are coming up at the moment as well. So this is really, we're going to check in against how you're performing against the action plans you've all developed, and really kind of just get an assessment on the spend of the grant. So each of your project managers will be reaching out to you over the next while just to do that. What we'll ask you to do is report it in Word first. So you'll fill out a survey and then we'll have a phone call to kind of discuss it and just see if there's any areas we can help you with. Is that okay? Great, you're all being very good and putting yourself on mute, so I'm assuming that's yes. But like I say, we're really excited to be working with you over the next year. And I know all of the girls have got up to date with your action plans and with your applications. So are really excited to get to meet you. So with that, that's all from me. If you do have questions, please reach out to me directly or any of the girls. But with that, I'm going to hand over seamlessly now as I stop sharing the screen eventually. So I'm going to hand over to Natalie to kick us off into the
Oh, can you hear me? I just lost, did we just lose?
Sorry, my Zoom unexpectedly cut out there. That is so typical of the situation.
I wonder whether I did it, Aisling, as I took over the screen share. Apologies if I did.
No, don't worry. This is Zoom as it is. It's fine. So I'm just going to hand over to Natalie to kick us off for today. I think we have a really great session lined up, and we've just run through some of the process, and I'm really excited to be part of this today. So thank you so much, Natalie.
Thanks, Aisling. It's lovely to meet you all, and I'm so grateful that you've all got your video screens on, because there's nothing worse than doing a webinar with a sea of cameras that are turned off. So thank you for that. I'm delighted to meet you. My name is Natalie Bagnall. It's possible that I've met some of you before. I know there might be a couple of people from Dress for Success here with whom I've worked before. I am a leadership coach and consultant. I do a bit of work with Rethink, and I'm really excited to be here with you this morning on this leadership workshop. Thank you for making the effort to submit to the survey that we sent out a few weeks ago. That gave us a nice idea of what was foremost on your mind, and it meant that we could tailor the content to what was really coming up for you at the moment. So that was useful to do. And I see some comments trickling through here on leadership generally as well. So that's really great. I picked the Samuel Beckett quotation because I think it's kind of apt for this year, which is, in a way, I felt that in the first lockdown, the rug had been pulled out from underneath my feet. And I thought, like, everything that we were used to doing, everything that professionally was normal for us, going into the office, meeting our colleagues, brainstorming with a whiteboard, was suddenly pulled out from underneath our feet, which was very disconcerting, very difficult. And although this second lockdown is more familiar and therefore, in some ways, I suppose, easier, it is a question of kind of like, just keep trying to do things differently and keep trying to use the time that's so discombobulated and anxiety feeling to try and spark some kind of creativity. So I often think about that, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, just try again, keep picking yourself up, keep trying to do something again, however exhausting that is. Okay, so I'm going to go through now, just flick through a little bit. So I'd like you to just take a piece of paper and a pen, or if you want to put it into the Zoom comment, you can, but just record it somewhere at this point. And we're going to come back to it later in the session. What are your 3 leadership strengths? What are the 3 things that you're good at as a leader? You may be aware of them yourself automatically. You might also think about what other people have said about your leadership skills. So just write those down now. And also think about the 3 things that people have said that you need to improve, or that yourself are not things that you're quite there yet at. And note those 3 things too. So 3 strengths and 3 areas for development, or areas that need improvement, and keep those to hand, because we're going to come back to those later in the session. At this point, I'll just note that I didn't get a volunteer for the demonstration that I think the Rethink team sent out yesterday and asked for a demo. We're going to look at the challenges that come up for you, and we're going to look at some theory around that, and we're going to go into exercise and breakout rooms to flex a technique around that. But I would love to demonstrate that in front of everyone as well myself. But obviously, I need a volunteer to do that. Just someone who has who is happy to share the issue that they were thinking about, that was top of mind for them when they filled in that survey. So I'll give you a few minutes on that. And if anyone wants to raise their hand, they can do that in a minute. We'll come back to that in a few minutes time. Okay, good. So you've captured your leadership strengths and weaknesses. Just keep those to hand, and we'll come back to them. So let's look at the survey. Again, thank you for taking the time to fill this in. As well as us getting results from the survey, I think it also does give you a chance to self-reflect a bit and to take a quiet moment to actually think about, what has come up for me over this period of time and what are my challenges? And they might be the same as what has always been a challenge for you in your leadership, or they might be very, very COVID 2020 specific. We found from the COVID related challenge that the majority of respondents, and I suppose it's not surprising, found that working remotely was tough, being apart from teams, being in the home environment. This was by clear the biggest current challenge that you were facing, with almost half of people stating that. And also the management of remote working, and I guess particularly when schools were closed, that meant juggling a lot of personal and professional issues. Just the isolation of working in an empty room all day long on your own after being out there with people is very tough. So that was coming through very clearly in the results. In addition, that professional, sorry for the typo there, that professional personal balance has been really affected by COVID-19, social distancing, lockdown, closing of society, not being able to see your family, suddenly having to juggle things differently, having to share the home office or having to create a home office, whatever it was. I became self-employed 4 years ago after being in the corporate world for many years. And my husband was a creative person. He'd always worked from home as a writer and a musician. And I was always so envious of him working from home, and I always really craved it. And actually 3 or 4 months into working for myself a few years ago, I found that I didn't really like it. I found kind of like I lost a sense of purpose. Like, I felt like, well, does anyone out there really care if I'm here? So I kind of felt that anyway. And with the enforced regulations this year on closing down offices and working from home, I've really felt that very, very severely. So I empathize with you. Excuse me. And while working from home is not new, some of you might have had the ability to be able to work from home before. Certainly in the States, 25% of people regularly work from home. But the degree and the extent of it has really disrupted and alienated us. And this will definitely be known for that. To go back to the leadership quotations for a moment, I think, if anything, one good thing that will come out of this year, it's that, as long as we stay healthy mentally and physically, collectively, we'll never have a year like this again, where everyone is going through such a difficult thing. And I do think that has given us the time to reflect and to pivot and to maybe renew in some way and do something differently. So, positive things do come out of bad things, although at the time it is uncomfortable. The other question was then my non-COVID related challenge. And there's definitely a theme coming through here where you can see that dealing with change is the biggest single challenge to effective leadership, whether that be in COVID or outside of COVID, that dealing with change is difficult. We have to flex skills that are tricky. We have to communicate very well. We have to do one thing one day and one thing another day. We can't be as prepared as maybe we feel we need to be. So dealing with change is difficult, but I have a good technique later in the session to share with you on that. Over half people said that, again, this leadership style thing coming through, that even outside of this year and the restrictions that we've had, that leadership is difficult. And it doesn't come naturally, and we have to learn it, and we can get better at it. It is a muscle that we develop. But over half of people said that it's a challenge. How we lead people, and whether that means that we have a team ourselves or an organization or a project, that's all leadership. And how we interact with others, whether those are our direct reports, our team, or clients, peers, our seniors, our bosses, or important stakeholders. That's all an ongoing leadership demand. And my biggest fear for 2021 was the other question that we asked you. And by far over a third of people said that the biggest fear is that things won't change, that we have this constant locking down, opening up, open, shut, which means that we constantly have to deal with the change that you're obviously very strongly alluding to. And it's such a further drain on personal reserves of energy. Having said that, there is a little flicker of positivity this week with the vaccine. We'll see what happens, but I know for now we can't rest on that too strongly. Yeah, and over a third of respondents are concerned that next year will be a repeat of this year. And that's disrupting for all types of organizations, whether you are helping others, whether you are trying to run a business or run a service. And then the ongoing disruption that casts a shadow over the sustainability of our businesses, over whether we can actually keep on going, whether the life cycle of the business will survive this, or whether we do actually have to close down and start up again and rethink. So difficult times. We're now in November, and this has really been going on now for the whole of the year. So as leaders, it's a really important time to think, what am I good at? What have I learned from this year? What could I do better? And that's really the purpose of this morning. So I wanted to do a demo now of a way to peer support, a way, and this is the one of the reasons I want to share this with you, both by demonstrating it and then having you go into breakout rooms on it, and we'll share that with you in a moment, is because it's actually a really useful technique for you to take back to the office. It is a really useful technique, a very easy and psychologically safe thing for you to do back in the office. Basically, one of the group today now will bring an issue to this forum. I will peer coach you on that issue. I'll follow a process on that that I will then share with you. And the idea of that is that for the volunteer, it will deepen self-awareness of that issue and hopefully throw up new ways of approaching it. And then when we go into the breakout sessions, we'll only be dealing with one. We only have 90 minutes today, so we'll only be focusing on one other topic in each of the groups. So I think that's 6 topics. But you'll all see how there's a lot of commonality in the issues that are coming through here. So I hope you'll all learn from each other in that way. Okay, so I'll pause now and wait for someone to raise their hand, but don't actually just raise their hand. Actually, just shout out if you're happy to volunteer. You must all be on mute because I can't hear the shouts of yes, I'll do it. Yes, I'll do it.
Yes, I do it.
Great.
Right.
Hello, Carmen.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, lovely to meet you.
I'm going to bring a real issue that I have, and it has to be see how can be sorted in a fair manner. So my issue was.
Carmen, before you start, I just want to say it's lovely to meet you and a pleasure to do this. Will you just tell us one line, just really, really briefly, of the company that you work for, that you run?
Rahim Family Resource Center. It's a family resource center, and our project is to set 3 community gardens. Our project aims to set 3 community gardens to reduce the food poverty in the area.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, wonderful. A topic close to my heart. Okay, lovely. So thank you, Carmen, for sharing this in advance. This will take about 10 minutes.
Right.
So I'm gonna be quite kind of like punchy through it. And first of all, I would just like to ask you, when we get to the end of the 10 minutes this morning, what progress will you have made on this? What specifically would you like me to help you with?
Probably to see if the way I manage the situation is the right one or not the right one. To have another opinion, right?
Okay, another opinion. So whether the way you're dealing with it is the right way or the wrong way.
Exactly.
Obviously, I can't determine that because I don't know what right and wrong is for you. Only you can determine that, but you can at least get another perspective. Yeah?
Yes, I need another perspective. That's it. Yeah, okay, you put it very well.
Tell me what's going on.
Look, we have 3 community gardens in public areas. Most of them are in housing estates. One of the housing estates in one of the areas has decided that yes, they want a community garden with a condition, and the condition is that the garden is only restricted to that residents living in the housing estate, which personally I think goes against the ethos of my whole project, which is public access to food and to horticulture skills that we are going to provide to people. So my question is, I say no to that, despite I did have potential participants in that residents association. because I try to tell them that we were public, the ethos of our project is very much around inclusion, and that was in confrontation with the ethos of the project itself.
Yeah, okay, that's
right?
interesting. And when you go back to the point at which you made public this opportunity, how do you think it fell so that they thought it could be a private garden instead of a public one?
I actually have no idea how they came to that conclusion, because for me, the way I presented was very clear. This is a garden for Adamstown, not for the Fairview or whatever, or Woodview or whatever residents association.
Yeah.
The way I tried to keep them on board was that I'm allocated fruit trees in that housing residence, right?
Yeah.
So they have a little bit of the project, but the main part of the project, which is the polytunnel, will be allocated in a different area because of their non-willingness to allow other people from the small community. It's a very small community, right?
Yeah.
A small community to go in and access the polytunnel.
So you've kind of you've tried to give them a little bit of what they want while maintaining the
Yes,
value of it. So a little bit of
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. You've tried to sort of meet them halfway. And what's their attitude like about it? What's their approach with you?
They were quite sharp. That they say clearly, we want a polytunnel if it's only for us. And I say clearly, no, the polytunnel is not for you only. It's going to be an open space. It's an educational space for the whole community, right? Yeah. And it's a source of food, will be in the future for the whole community. And they were very sharp in their approach, and I was very determined not to give in either, because it will fail the ethos of the project. We need to reduce food poverty. We need to ensure that people learn to feed themselves maybe in different manners, right?
Yeah.
And this is a rural, very isolated area, no transport. So this is a great asset for the community. And I can't see allocating that asset, which is from the very beginning of the program was clear. There was a public, and there everybody was included, that there will be running programs for children, for adults, for elderly, to restrict it only to a residents association.
Yeah. Okay. So when you repeat the ethos of it and the vision of it, which is a very strong message, how do they react? They just sort of push back, do they, or
they say that they don't allow it to put it there. It's simple.
Okay.
You know?
Okay. So they have some.
I try to make them reflect. There is social issues in the village, and I can see that social issues coming through, right? Some residents association is better off than the other, so they don't want the more. But socially, for me, it makes more sense that the other ones, the ones who are really suffering food poverty, have access to the polytunnel, that not the better off, let's put it mildly like that, have a little polytunnel for their entertainment. You know, that wasn't the idea. The idea is to reduce food poverty in the area, which has been well researched by this Family Resource Center. We have for years supply food cloud in that area, right? So we know exactly where food poverty, and it's a fact that has been a bigger demand for food lately. So by providing a polytunnel to a residents association and saying it's only for you, I'm actually failing to the ethos of my project. And that for me, it's important, you know.
And last question on the circumstances of it. Has this ever happened before, where there's been a tension between the vision of it and the actual practicality of it?
We know there is tensions in that area. We know that there are social tensions in the area. But, you know, and we play always a role of trying to bring the groups together and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
There are tensions there. There is a history, let's put it like that.
Okay.
So I can't feed more to that, you know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So it sounds like what you've tried to do, you've already tried to do one thing, which is to give them a little bit of an olive branch.
To try to, to try to compromise a little bit without compromising the entire project.
Okay. And that hasn't worked. They haven't accepted that.
Oh yes, they accept the fruit trees. Yeah.
They have. Okay. So where are you at now with it?
I found a new site, and it's a site that is accessible to everybody, you know, because it's in the primary school, as beside the primary school. So we have an access that is a private access to the polytunnel. So everybody is being invited to participate, and it's up to them as well to participate or no. So
Okay.
I have tried to find a solution that was. And on the other hand, I'm trying to make a little bit of peace with them by saying, okay, look, you don't have the polytunnel, but maybe you can have planted around the housing state your trees, your fruit trees, and so everybody can have access a little bit to fruit in the future in the public space. Well, so I try, to balance.
One thing that strikes me, Carmen, about the negotiation, if you like, is the sort of the power on each side. You know, you have a vision to help others. You have a very altruistic vision to help the community, and they have a demand to do it their way. And you've given them a couple of gestures, to kind of to give them part of that under their control. But there seems to be, I'm just wondering, where does the final decision get made? Can you force your point and make it happen, or actually does it have to be an agreement between two parties?
Yeah, but it's not two parties only here, right? There's more than two, because if no, we reduce to Rahim Family Resource Center one party, and the other would be this specific residents association. But there is more people in the community. And we have to give a voice to everybody, you know what I mean? And try to benefit everybody, not to benefit a minority.
Yeah. Okay. So right. It is what it is, and the situation is
what it is,
as it is now. So what can you do to resolve this now? Let's just, what are one or two things that you can do as a result of just having teased it out with me that you could do differently from now?
I think I should, okay. There was a chance to go house by house and doing outreach work in that housing state, right? And I think because I got really angry, and that was my failure. I really got angry when I heard. I thought this is racist. Is this? Is that? And I got a little blinded by that.
Okay.
And so I should have maybe keep a little more rational. Do the outreach work house by house and explaining this is the ethos of the project. This will benefit not only you guys, the next generation and the next probably, and this is what we want to achieve. So instead of that, I took a very non-rational decision, and I say, I'm not going to beg, right? So, which is, I should have spoken to them one by one. I think I should have that.
Okay. So the kind of lessons coming out of it, then things you could do differently now is more of a kind of one by one approach. So rather than
I think so. In this case, I think so. Yeah,
ground level.
Because we had half of the residents stayed, a little less than a half was in favor, and 1 or 2% over the half was against.
Yeah.
And because they have this voting system was against, that's it. I should have go visit them, the ones who were against, and give them more information about the project. That's what I should have done, I think.
Okay.
I don't know.
So Natalie, just to say, there's some insights coming in from the chat here. So there's a question about them, can you move the polytunnel somewhere else? And also maybe it's just about, so Brian has come in with, maybe it's not around kind of the ownership of the polytunnel, but a fear of others coming into the community. So maybe that's one of the areas that, is not being addressed. Does that make sense?
That's interesting. So maybe
there's I got lost there.
Sorry, so it's just about having people they don't know or they don't trust coming into the community. So maybe that's something that possibly needs to be addressed, but we might we might just hand back to Natalie on that, but I think that's an interesting insight.
Yeah, and thanks for using the chat function, everyone. This is where peer coaching becomes really useful, and you'll see this in the breakouts. Carmen, just to wrap up on that, and thank you again for volunteering. So there's opinions coming in which you can take up afterwards in the chat, but you, by your own admission, you reckon that you could go ground level down, you know, kind of like grass seeds down, less emotion and more kind of rational. Which is hard when you're passionate about something, because it's a cause as well. You're trying to do something better. Is there one other thing that you could do now? Like, obviously there are personal lessons here, but what practically could you do differently now? What other one?
I think still the outreach work is there to be done. We have a new site. It's very accessible to everybody. It's only at the doorsteps of both communities, of both residents associations, right in the middle. And it's inviting everybody to participate once we have the garden tutor in place, when we are out of this lockdown situation, right? So take it fresh, do the outreach work, invite everybody, put something in the letterbox, maybe inviting them to attend and to see to get to know the project, you know.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Right?
Thank you so much for volunteering, Carmen. It's not easy to speak to 40 other people. And that was a really interesting example. So I'm going to just take us through now to the why peer coaching. So you saw a little bit there about a couple of things that came through. So first of all, Carmen, in articulating her issue and just getting out there in the open, she was already coaching herself. She was already coming up with ideas of what she should do differently in addition. So although I can give her straightforward and candid advice, actually she's giving herself a lot of advice as well. It really does give perspective by saying it out loud. Peer coaching offers advice that benefits the organization. Yeah, I mean, it's less about how we can help Carmen, but also about the gardens and the community. So it really focuses on the organization. I think peer coaching as well is between me and Carmen. There's a peer there. You know, there isn't a power struggle, or there is no hierarchy. So I can be really honest. The comments coming through from the chat can be really honest. We have issues in common experience. So it's a very equality type of coaching and advice giving. Okay, so you're going to have a go at this yourselves now. Peer-based problem solving. It won't be one-on-one, so it'll be less of a slightly kind of intense backwards and forwards that you saw with me and Carmen. There are 3 topics that emerged most common from the survey, and that's what we want to focus on: remote working, leadership style, and dealing with change. You're going to be split into groups according to how you answered those questions, and then each group will be, I think it's around 9, 10, and we'll need a volunteer from each of those groups in the smaller groups to just come up with their issue. And the issue should be either remote working, if you're in the remote working group, leadership, your leadership style, or a leadership challenge if you're in the leadership style group, and dealing with change, what your specific change issue is if you're in that group. And you're going to peer coach each other. So the process is that one person will volunteer their challenge and present it to the group, exactly like Carmen did. You heard me ask her to articulate what the problem was and how I could best help her. It's important you do that. Then the group asks questions to make sure they have a good idea of the issue. Then the volunteer will mute themselves, gag themselves. They can keep their camera on, but they are not allowed to contribute while the group discusses the issue. Okay. So a little bit different from what I demonstrated. And then the problems owner will then rejoin, reflect on the conversation, and commit to 3 actions. And you saw me enforce that really with Carmen, that actions, because the point of peer coaching is that something has to change. So you really need to push people on that. So let me just summarize. Oh, in total 20 minutes. And that's important because we need you to come back. And this is a useful, you know, ideally we want you to be able to take this back to the office, because this is a really useful, easy little tool to do with problem solving. So there's 4 roles in the group. Okay, you've got the issue holder, that's the volunteer. So start preparing the idea of what your problem is if you're happy to volunteer. The timekeeper, that person needs to keep the group on tack to 20 minutes, because then the breakout room will close. The coaches, so that's the remainder of the group, asking questions and then discussing the issue. The timekeeper needs to make sure that the issue owner stops after a few minutes and stays silent while the rest of the group discuss the issue. And then the facilitators, that's me and the rest of the Rethink team, will join a group each and we'll help the facilitation on it. Okay, so just going back to the process. So one person volunteers and they talks about their problem for 3 minutes. The group asks questions to make sure they understand the issue. The group discusses the issue without the owner being part of the conversation. And then the owner rejoins, reflects with the group and commits to 3 actions. Is clear? Shout out if you've got anything that you need me to explain further, because I can't see the comments, by the way.
Yeah, so just picking up on one question there from Helena, just to be clear, questions in step 2 do not offer solutions. You're only unpicking and clarifying the problem.
Yeah, at the question stage you are. So when the problem owner is in the conversation with you and you're just clarifying the problem, that's not solutions. That's a good point. Thank you, whoever raised that. But when you're discussing it without the problem owner in the group, do you follow me? You can talk about solutions then. You can say, for example, oh, I had this problem last year and what I did was X, Y, Z. Or you can say, I wonder whether the person has considered this, or it seems to me that maybe the person is actually contributing to the problem by not doing X, Y, Z. Do you know what I mean? So you can really thrash it out there and you can bring in solutions as well. Don't worry too much about rules around that. But the step before, when the person is articulating the problem, be very synthetic then and very focused on just understanding the issue. Okay. So these are the 3 groups. So group 1 will be split into 2, group 2 will be split into 2, group 3 will be split into 2. And group 1, the 2 groups, the volunteer needs to have a remote working issue. Group 2, the 2 volunteers need to have a leadership issue. And group 3, the volunteers need to have a change issue. Okay. And Karen, I think the rooms will open shortly. We'll just need another couple of minutes to ask any questions. You're going to have a facilitator anyway in the background to help. So, you know, that will help you get the system set up. But does anyone else have a burning question? No? Okay. Karen, I think we can open up. Yeah?
All of our time management skills are getting a lot better because of that. So
it's true. It's like 30 seconds. No, what can we cover? So. I think that's everybody back.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to share my screen again. Excuse me. So the so that as I just said to my group, you know, it's such a short intervention when you're doing it in a group like this with our time restrictions. But I hope, certainly my group did, and I hope that others found that for the problem holder, just sharing it, you know, articulating it, tossing it around a bit, getting other people's views, just sort of putting it in the spotlight like that for 15 minutes, help get some deeper perspective. And maybe even if it just substantiated what you were already thinking for the problem owner, helped in that way. And I really encourage you to take this technique back to your forums. You know, we actually talked about it as a solution maybe to our issue holders issue, which is, you know, what about doing a group forum like this with the stakeholders where there's some tricky buy-in. So remember it as a really great little technique, and I'll send the slides out afterwards. So we focused there on 3 areas: remote working, leadership, and change. And we did that because that's what we found from the survey were the things that were keeping you up at night most often. Of course, they're massive topics, and under each of the topics, there's 100 other little tiny elements. But what we're trying to do here is to maybe just kind of like go for the top learnings. And I've just got a little bit of theory here to share with you. My objective when talking to the Rethink team was to try and give you some takeaways, some maybe some toolkits, something to to be able to do yourself back in the real world, back in the office. So first of all, on remote working, if we just think about the practicalities that come as a result of remote working, there are distractions. Someone told me a scary statistic that that 85% of people have actually got another screen open while they are on the Zoom call with you. So, you know, you're only, most of the time, you're only ever getting half the concentration. So, and a real lack of boundaries there between home office and home, whether it's someone in the kitchen putting the washing machine on, or whether it's the, you know, the kids running around, or the postman at the door. It's distracting. The tech support may fail. This causes a lot of additional stress, particularly for people who wouldn't have been technically au fait before. And it's tiring. You know, you have to be very on form. You have to contribute. You have to sort of work harder, I think, to collaborate on video. The other thing about remote working is the connection. It's lonely. You know, there's a lack of connection with peers. You're not getting as much from your boss as you would have previously. And as a boss yourself, you're maybe not giving as much to your reportees as you would have done. It's harder to know what's going on and feel connected. That can lead to micromanagement, which is very, very alienating. It can also lead to disengagement, which is very demotivating. And that's the thing, you know, these are the things that make people look for another job. So beware of that, both if you're a manager who feels you might be trying to be too controlling, or maybe if you yourself are being disengaged and finding it hard to actually feel like you did before. And everything is planned with remote working. You know, there's less serendipity, there's less informality. You can't have a chat at the coffee machine. You're not going to walk home and get the dart with someone leaving the office. So yeah, until you get used to it, everything is a little bit more formal. It can be quiet and isolating. It feels like it lacks purpose, like I told you about my experience. The visible output becomes all the more important. Metrics and benchmarks speaks volumes, and there's a tendency to want other people to be over involved, and trust really dissipates. I think if I think of the two things that maybe have a kind of backbone to working effectively remotely, I think one is to really know and be confident about your leadership style. And that's one of the reasons why earlier in the session, I asked you to connect on what you do well and what you don't do so well. And also about how you give yourself time back and how you disconnect. So yeah, there's just a quote there I heard on RTE, which I really liked. From, you know, Maureen Gaffney, the psychologist. A huge amount of the communication at work is not about work, it's about support, trying out a new idea. A hugely important part of work. Teams are the basic unit in workplaces, and without a team, you don't have that safe space to be able to share. So going back, the leadership and the kind of giving yourself something back. Sorry, I just have to keep moving my pictures around. There's a lovely I went on a training course some years ago about managing your energy, and there was a lovely little technique that came out of that, which is partly about awareness of yourself, but also partly about techniques, and it's called your energy toolkit. It's just a really simple thing to do. So first of all is start to identify what your triggers are. For me, I know that between the hours of 2 and 3 in the afternoon, it's a real dead time. And if I don't fill that time with something very specific to concentrate on, I kind of get a bit kind of like low and purposeless. So try and understand what your triggers are. It could be noise. It could be not knowing how to progress in something at work, or it could be something domestic. And just being aware of it sometimes is enough to be able to counteract it to a certain extent. Ritual. If I have a really horrible presentation, and I used to have this in my corporate life quite a lot, where I'd have to travel to give an update on my numbers to someone very senior, and it used to be just, you know, totally anxiety creating, just really, really awful. So I would always make sure I had a little bit of a ritual around it. I would go to a department store and buy myself something nice to wear, or I would go and I'd have a nice drink in a little bar in, you know, whichever city I was in. I gave myself something back, and it became a little ritual to counteract the total anxiety of what it was that I was actually in the seat for. And then renewal, and you hear about this all the time. In fact, the HSE have got a really nice campaign on the radio about this at the moment, about the 5 things to give yourself back if you're suffering from stress in the workplace. And renewal is one of them. So, I mean, I know you hear about exercise all the time, but honestly, to just get out of the house occasionally, do a couple of walks of the block. I find talking to myself out loud is quite useful. Just renew your energy by doing something different. And you'll find that I think those 3 things can be really helpful in energy toolkit while working remotely. Okay, so the other thing I think that's worth bearing in mind is about personal leadership style. If you know and you're confident about what your leadership style is, and you know the things you're good at, and you're working on the things you're not so good at, it stands you in really good stead for the change that you go through, or the issues that you're having to deal with, or any kind of challenge that comes up. And there are 2 pieces of research, or one is a book actually, and one's a piece of research that I love when it comes to personal leadership style. They're both actually quite simple. One of them is actually quite an old book called The 1 Minute Manager. Anyone heard of it? It's by Ken Blanchard and Spencer Johnson. It goes back, I think it was written in the 1960s. Check it out. It's really great. And the other is a piece of research done by Google called Project Oxygen, which you can get hold of really easily on the internet. So whoops, sorry, wrong direction. So first of all, the 1 Minute Manager, it's just really simple. So what they talk about in this book is about 4 things. First of all, know where you want to go, have clear goals. So know that path forward, of that vision forward. And even if it's just, a few steps forward, it's about, right, I'm here now and I want to go there. What are the steps that I need to do to get there? What are the numeric goals? Who do I need to get in my team? How do I need to actually, create those steps very, very simply? Create a little map as to how you want to get there. The second is that they talk about in the book is about being a great people person. So bringing people along with you, showing interest in people, being a good person to work around, be nice, be understanding, listen, just be a good people leader. The third thing they talk about is sometimes throwing yourself under the bus for the team, but certainly even if you don't throw yourself under the bus, roll up the sleeves and get on with it with them. So maybe have that difficult conversation on behalf of the team. And when I say team, by the way, you don't have to be managing big groups of people for this. Your team could be your clients or your partners or your stakeholders. It doesn't matter. The skills are the same. Having a roadmap, being a good person to work around, rolling up your sleeves and getting involved is still all as important, whether it's with direct reports or with clients and colleagues. And you hear a lot about authenticity in the workforce. I think it's really important about bringing yourself to the work, warts and all. I've worked with people before where they're a completely different person outside of work from the one they are inside of work. Try to be that person both in and out. And now where the boundaries are blurred a bit more, this arguably could be easier. But understand what you're good at and what you're not so good at, and be honest and open about that. Bring that authenticity to the table. The Project Oxygen is a piece of research. It was a big piece of research done by Google back. I mean, it will be 10 years old now, but the elements of it still stand up. And there's a lot of crossover between this book's work and Oxygen. To be a good coach, that means giving feedback, helping people do their job better, helping people resolve their issues. Be hands-on. Don't micromanage. And we talked about that before with remote working, because it's a very, very easy trap to get into. It's extraordinarily demotivating to be micromanaged, to be having someone controlling and checking on you the whole time. Expressing interest and concern. So we talked about that before with the book. Be a decent person, express concern, give people some time off, be understanding of people's situations. Productive, results orientated. It makes it easier for you to move forward if you know what the numbers are and what success looks like and what those benchmarks and milestones are. Being a good communicator, listening. 2 years ago at the Pendulum Summit, which is a big leadership summit in Dublin, there was a big piece on empathy and leadership. Put yourself into someone else's shoes, try and walk around in them for a while, try and understand what it's like to be them. And it's a really, really held to be a very important leadership trait. Helping team with career development, even if it's not necessarily in your own department, organization, or team, is enabling them to think what might be next for them, and expect that from your own managers too. have a clear vision and strategy. We talked about that before, and having the technical skills to advise and support. So whatever kind of, I think that's probably very relevant for you as well, because the two case histories I was just involved in there before, I heard such passion coming through. So I think, you know, you've got the skills because you're really in there in the weeds with the organization. Whether it was the first one we heard in the group, Carmen's, or the second one that you heard in the breakout groups. So personal leadership style, identify it, know what you're good at, know what you need to work at, and it can help you through some of these tough times. Okay, just a quick check on time there. I think we're good. So the final one then, the final thing that came up in the survey was about dealing with change. I mean, the only consistency in life itself is change, right? You know, I mean, it's just never ending. This is a very famous model by a leadership philosopher called Kotter, who came up with the 8-step change model. Some of you who have done diplomas or MBAs might have come across this before. And whatever the changes you're dealing with, when I was preparing for this leadership workshop, I actually tried out my change, which was that this is the first year I won't be going to England for Christmas, and I had to communicate that to my family. And I ran it through this process just to see if it worked for something as kind of small and personal as that. And some of the steps did hold strong, you know. So whether you have a really big work issue, changing something, and we saw evidence of this in our breakout room, something, you know, really tricky and political, or whether you have something just small, these techniques can help. So the first step is that everyone needs to know that there is change coming and be taken out of their comfort zones. They need to be aware of the need for change and the urgency. You need to form a team. So you need to know who is in your boat. What's your role as the leader or as the facilitator? Who is the leader, and what do the other people involved in that team need to do and know? But you need to be very clear as to who your kind of change team is, so that the people can be accountable. An inspiring vision. So, you know, we heard this with the community gardens, is this beautiful idea of bringing a space to the community to enable people to grow their own things in that space, a shared space. I mean, you know, it's such a lovely idea. So creating that inspiring vision that sends shivers, that is very, very easy to follow. Encouraging cooperation and support. So you need to going back. I mean, you know, it isn't enough to just articulate, we need the change and this is how we're going to do it, and then have it happen. You need to encourage cooperation and support for the vision. Keep checking in, keep evangelizing, keep going back and buying people in. You need to empower the followers to be the best they can under this change, whether that's by investing in training, coaching, mentoring, being a different kind of manager, sharing the overall vision with them and the overall picture for change. So making sure that the followers are really empowered in that way, and it's not just down to you to drive it forward. Breaking it down into short-term goals. So as we saw from the 1 Minute Manager learnings and the Project Oxygen, short-term goals are not only give you a clear idea of progress, but they also make it a bit more rewarding. You know, rather than having the whole change being the metric for success, you've got the smaller, more motivating, shorter elements of it to be able to celebrate success from. The seventh and the penultimate then is to not rush it. It's a slow process to be able to sustain the acceleration and to be ready for people to drop out and have to bring them back in again. And then the final one then is about embedding it. So once you've decided what that change is, and assuming it's a permanent change, it needs to be integrated into the whole value system and strategy for the company, so it doesn't just end there. So that's again, you know, a quick look at a few different pieces of theory. I'll just sum up by going back. We looked about remote working and how to make that easier with a few personal tips and tricks, but also this idea of this energy toolkit. We talked about personal leadership style, and I shared with you the 1 Minute Manager and Project Oxygen, which are the ones that I think are the best. And you can research those yourself. They kind of say the same things, but one is much more up to date, the other is much more established. But ultimately, you know, it's about being a good leader. And then the final one then was about how to deal with change. And I understand that all your situations are very different from each other, and they're very different maybe from what you see here as a very high level conceptual methodology. But if you break it down and you apply it, there are elements that will work whatever your change project is. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking for a while, and I'm going to let some comments and some questions flow up either from the comment column or spontaneously. And
I'm going to go and buy that book, the IO one, the 1 Minute Manager. I remember my dad having that 40 years ago.
Yeah, it's I tell you,
Yeah.
I'm showing my age. It's great. No, have a look at it. And also, it's written in a really easy style. It's like a story. So you'll read it in a couple of hours.
Yeah, no, I have memories of my dad talking about it when I was a very young boy. So that gives you my age away a bit. Maybe I wasn't even that young at the time. But yeah, that's a while back. But yeah, he thought it was.
It's still a bestseller now. It's still a bestseller now. Yeah.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, or I'm then going to get you to just go back to the work that you did at the beginning of the session here, and just spend a couple of minutes thinking about those strengths and those areas for development on your leadership. And as a result of our conversations today, has anything changed or shifted for you? But before I give you a few minutes to do that, I just want to make sure there's no burning questions or comments. Nothing coming through in the comments, Aisling, no?
No, there's not on the chat.
Okay, so just take a couple of minutes then, go back to your laptop or your paper and pen or whatever, and think about those strengths and areas for improvement, and rewrite them if they've changed for you as a result of the last couple of hours, particularly for the people who were doing the demos, who might have got some deeper awareness of some perspective about how they're handling themselves, the issue.
Natalie, just one question coming through here.
Yeah.
Any suggestions for time management and different structuring of day? Suggestions.
So I'm a big fan of an electronic calendar. I tend to let that do everything. So what I do is I always have very clearly my meetings, and anything external meeting like this, for example, is in red. You know, you can color code meetings. And I use my calendar then also to plug in renewal. I don't call it renewal, but, you know, time out, walk, coffee, get out, rescue time, you know, whatever you want to call it. I block time for that. And I also put in, you know, little lists of things. So every morning, every 9 to 10, every day I try to block out. So I use my calendar for that. So yeah, I mean, find the system that works for you. Some people use systems like HubSpot or Salesforce. They use CRMs and things to organize their time. I like an electronic calendar. Some people like, you know, a pen and paper, a to-do list every day, write it in the evening before you start the next day. And then you always know exactly what you got to do the next morning. Does anyone have any tips and tricks on time management they could share? Joanne? Yeah.
Yeah, there's some really good books. Thanks a million, Natalie. That was great. Thank you very much. Tony Schwartz has written a book called The Way We're Working Isn't Working. It's written years ago, about 10, 12 years ago, and it's super. And about how the way we work and work and work and work, and actually it doesn't make sense. If we were becoming musicians or we were becoming champion tennis players, we wouldn't work like this all the time. It's not actually the way, it's not actually a sensible way to just keep on working. So Tony Schwartz, The Way We're Working Isn't Working. He's got a TED Talk too that's worth looking at. Also the power of full engagement, all that engagement stuff that you're talking about, and the energy renewal. There's lots of nice work done around our 5 senses, and how if we do things for our 5 senses, like listen to some nice music you love, or look through photographs of you know, that you like looking at, or anything like that, that actually is the quickest way to renew your energy.
Oh, I love that idea. Yeah. The photographs are beautiful.
There's some nice stuff as well around ultradian rhythm, and around if you work in 90-minute intervals, that that's the best way to work. That's the way musicians will work really well. So sort of say, I'm going to focus now for the next 90 minutes, then take 10 minutes break and so on. And that's the best way to get it. So there's lots of really nice stuff. The Powerful Engagement is another great Audible or audiobook or written book, whichever you prefer. I like the Audible because the author often reads it and emphasizes to you what they want you to hear. So that's really nice.
You might just add that in the column, in the comments, Joanne, would you? Those
Sure.
references, thank you.
Sure.
One other tip that people might find useful is, I can't remember if I read this a while ago or if I heard it, but when we assign ourselves tasks, we tend to think that we're obviously going to get much further than we do. And then when we don't finish a task in an hour, when we've dedicated an hour to it, we tend to run over on time. So then it's 90 minutes, it's 120 minutes, and we're not actually getting to the other things in our list that day. Whereas if you can actually approach it and say, I'm not going to have this result by the end of it, but I'm going to spend an hour on this, this many days per week. It gives you that little bit more leeway. There's still urgency there, but it gives you that bit more leeway to actually work on that task. And then after 60 minutes, you can say, okay, that's enough. I can move on to the next thing now, rather than saying, I have to get this done today. Now, obviously, there's certain deadlines that have to be met, but in the bigger scheme of things, it keeps everything ticking away rather than putting yourself under that pressure constantly.
That's great. Thanks, Lorraine. That's really interesting.
This is Orla here. We were working 24/7 at the beginning of all of this because we had so many concerns for people, and people were getting in touch with us literally 24/7. It could be 10 o'clock on a Saturday evening or any time. And we're a part-time office, and we were really worn out, and we really had to work hard to get back to doing the outreach sessions on the time we used to do them in locations, and make sure that we had remote outreach sessions at that time. Of course, we talked to people outside those times, but we really had to work very hard to take back our working days, because we had so much we could be doing, and we have found that we've pulled back to try and be actually in line with our working hours, which are all part-time, the three of us here, and it's actually working quite well. But it was quite a while before we said, here now.
Yeah,
as we dragged ourselves up off the floor, here we're not even being effective. Oh, well, we probably were being effective, but it was at an enormous cost. And the service users who we work with are mostly responding to the timings that we're giving. And of course, anybody can ring us. And if it's an emergency, of course we deal with it. But it is not our standard fare. Our standard fare is that we have certain hours when we're available, and we're doing, as I say, timed outreach sessions that we were doing to direct provision centres anyhow, but now they're done remotely. We were open for appointments 2 days a week, and that's gone for this time. But that was a hard transition to make.
Yeah.
It really was a hard one to just say, here now, let's pull back. Let's be doing our 21 hours rather than 60, 70, which it was at times.
Yeah. Well, because you have to, if you're not in good shape, you can't be of help, so it's a question of looking after them to look after yourself. It's about boundary management, isn't it? Okay, we have 2 minutes left, so it's such a lovely valuable forum to just have all these great thoughts and all this wonderful energy. I'm just love to just hear from another couple of people before we have to break up. Joanne.
I feel it would be remiss of me not to say that, well, firstly, look, thanks a million for the session. It's brilliant. But the organisation that I work for, Lift Ireland, our whole remit and vision is to lift the level of leadership in the country. And every single person in this room at the moment is a leader. Every single person is a leader. And what we do is we help people to build their inner leader. So maybe at some stage there is an opportunity, because we are one of the projects, we're looking to help other organizations to build their leadership. That's what we do. That's our only.
I should have spoken to you before.
That's our only focus. So really, really happy to share with anybody what we're doing. And, you know, we're doing it in schools and corporates and community-based organizations. So really happy to share. So all the things that you talked about, Natalie, were perfect. They really were. And in building your leadership and empowering your people and holding people accountable. And what we do is we give you a process to show you exactly how to do that in a really, really simple way and a really time-efficient way.
That's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that, Joanna. I'll definitely follow up with you on that.
Yeah, I'll fill you in. I can fill you in afterwards.
Yeah, great. Okay, so Rethink team, I think we're bang on time, and I'm sure you probably respect the 90-minute boundary. So I think we're done. Yeah. Does anyone need to say anything, Aisling or Amy or Sinead or anyone? You're good for me to close up.
Yeah, no, we're just, you know, that was great. Thank you so much for everything, Natalie. I think a really insightful morning and a lot of food for thought and a lot of great book recommendations from the group. So thanks so much for all of that. So no, I just want to say thanks for engaging, everybody. It was really great. I know it's hard when we have such a big number, but it really does add to the process and also the you know, the insights and the learnings that we can all take from it. So thank you again for engaging. So that's perfect from us. So Natalie, if you'd like to close out, that'd be great.
Lovely. Well, so thanks again, and I will send the slides around through Rethink to everyone, so you've got those references and everything. And it was a pleasure to meet you all. I hope I can do some more work with you. And thank you for your interactivity. It does make a much more joyful Zoom call when you can see people and you can chat to people. It's almost like real life. So thank you, and stay safe, and see you again.
Okay. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Bye.